Mr. Whitmore, sir. There's a situation back at the estate. The assistant's voice trembled through the phone, but not as much as Samuel's hands did when he arrived back at his Nashville mansion. The estate was swarming with security, lawyers, and nervous board members pacing across the marble foyer. But what made Samuel Whitmore truly tremble was the sight of his 5-year-old daughter, Madeline, standing beside me, Caroline Hayes, holding my hand tightly as she whispered something into his ear that made his entire face go pale. "She saved me, Daddy. And she saved you too." But I told her what Uncle Richard and Miss Avery said. I told her everything. He turned slowly toward me, the woman he'd trusted to care for his daughter, the woman he never believed would uncover a plot that could have destroyed not only him, but his entire company. And now, the truth was out, and every lie was about to explode in their faces. My name is Caroline Hayes, and 2 months ago, I was just a laid-off elementary school teacher struggling to make ends meet in Nashville, Tennessee. I never imagined my life would collide with private jets, champagne meetings, and high-stakes boardrooms. But life has a funny way of throwing you into situations you never saw coming. It was a rainy Tuesday in April when I spotted the job listing. Temporary live-in caregiver needed for 5-year-old girl. 2 weeks. Excellent compensation. Discretion required. The listing mentioned it was for a high-profile family but gave no names. I needed the money desperately. My rent was due and substitute teaching. Gigs were scarce, so I applied, expecting nothing. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in a sleek downtown office, facing a stern woman named Lydia, who scrutinized my resume as if searching for hidden criminal activity. "Your background checks came back clean," she said, not looking up. "No social media scandals, no questionable associations. That's rare these days." "I'm a pretty boring person," I replied with a nervous laugh. She didn't smile. "Mr. Whitmore appreciates boring. Boring is safe." That was the first time I heard his name. Samuel Whitmore, the reclusive billionaire CEO of Langston Capital Ventures. A man whose face occasionally graced business magazines but who fiercely guarded his private life, especially since losing his wife to cancer 3 years earlier. "You'll need to sign these." Lydia pushed a stack of NDAs across the table. "If you speak about anything you see or hear in the Whitmore home, the legal consequences will be significant." I signed them all. What choice did I have? My bank account was hovering near zero, and my landlord's patience was wearing thin. 2 days later, a sleek black car pulled up outside my modest apartment. The driver, a stoic man named Marcus, loaded my 2 suitcases into the trunk while neighbors peeked through their curtains. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked as we drove through Nashville's winding roads. "Belle Meade," he replied. "Mr. Whitmore's estate." I'd heard of Belle Meade, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Tennessee, but nothing prepared me for what awaited at the end of that long, tree-lined driveway. A sprawling mansion of limestone and glass, nestled among perfectly manicured gardens. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement of power, of generational wealth. Marcus parked in front of massive oak doors that swung open before I could even reach for the handle. And there he stood, Samuel Whitmore himself, taller than he appeared in photos, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything in their path. He wasn't classically handsome, but there was something magnetic about him, a quiet intensity that commanded attention. "Miss Hayes," he extended his hand, "thank you for coming on such short notice." His grip was firm, his gaze direct. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight silver at his temples. He couldn't have been older than 42, but responsibility had aged him. "It's my pleasure, Mr. Whitmore," I managed, suddenly aware of my simple cotton dress and scuffed flats. "I'm looking forward to meeting your daughter." A flicker of softness crossed his face. "Madeline is special. She's been through a lot since her mother passed. She doesn't warm up to people easily." He led me through a foyer with soaring ceilings into a sunlit room where a small figure sat at a piano, her fingers dancing over the keys with surprising skill for someone so young. She stopped playing when we entered, turning to study me with eyes that mirrored her father's, curious, cautious, and far too perceptive for a 5-year-old. "Maddie," Samuel said gently, "this is Miss Hayes. She'll be staying with you while I'm in New York." The little girl slid off the piano bench, approached me with careful steps, and extended her hand formally. "Do you play?" she asked, nodding toward the piano. "A little," I admitted, "but nowhere near as beautifully as you do." She seemed to consider this answer, then nodded. "I can teach you my song if you want." I felt Samuel watching us, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I'd love that, Madeline. Only Daddy calls me Madeline, she said matter-of-factly. Everyone else calls me Maddie, except when I'm in trouble. I couldn't help smiling. Am I in trouble already? The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. Not yet. Samuel cleared his throat. Lydia will show you to your quarters, Miss Hayes. I have some calls to make, but we'll discuss Madeline's schedule over dinner. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. My cousin Richard and my executive assistant Avery may stop by occasionally. They help manage things when I'm away. After he left, Lydia appeared and led me upstairs to a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked lush gardens and a swimming pool that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Dinner is at 7, Lydia informed me. Mr. Whitmore expects punctuality. As soon as she left, I sank onto the plush bed, trying to process how dramatically my life had changed in just a few days. From unemployment notices to Egyptian cotton sheets, from ramen noodles to what would undoubtedly be a gourmet dinner, I should have felt grateful, relieved. Instead, a strange uneasiness settled over me. The mansion was beautiful, yes, but it felt hollow somehow, like a museum rather than a home. In the silence, I could almost hear the echo of what was missing. Laughter, warmth, the chaos of family life. I unpacked my meager belongings, hanging my clothes in a closet built for a wardrobe 10 times the size. My few possessions looked almost embarrassed to be there, like uninvited guests at an exclusive party. At precisely 7 o'clock, I made my way downstairs, following the sound of voices to a formal dining room where Samuel and Maddie were already seated. A crystal chandelier cast a warm glow over the polished table set for 3. Ah, Miss Hayes, Samuel gestured to the chair across from him. Right on time. Dinner was an elegant affair. Roasted duck with cherry reduction, seasonal vegetables from the estate's garden, and a wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Throughout the meal, Samuel outlined Madeline's schedule. Piano lessons on Wednesdays, swimming on Thursdays, a tutor who came for reading and mathematics 3 times a week. She has nightmares sometimes, he added quietly while Maddie was distracted by dessert. Since her mother, she might come looking for you. I nodded, catching a glimpse of something beneath his controlled exterior. Worry, perhaps, or guilt. The guilt of a father leaving his child, even if just for business. I'll take good care of her, Mr. Whitmore. I promise. He studied me for a moment, as if trying to determine whether I was simply saying what he wanted to hear. I know you will, Miss Hayes. That's why you're here. Little did I know then that taking care of Maddie would lead me into a web of corporate intrigue and family betrayal that would change all our lives forever. Little did I know that in this house of marble and secrets, a 5-year-old's whisper would soon become the most powerful sound of all. Samuel Whitmore left for New York the following morning. I stood on the front steps with Maddie, watching as his sleek Bentley disappeared down the long driveway. The little girl's hand felt small in mine, and though her face remained composed, I felt her grip tighten as her father vanished from sight. He'll be back before you know it, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Maddie looked up at me with those disconcertingly mature eyes. That's what everyone always says. Inside, she led me on what she called the official tour, though I suspected it was more for her benefit than mine, a way to establish control in her changing environment. She showed me her playroom, bigger than most apartments, the library, 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and the kitchen, where Chef Anton reigned supreme, though he softened visibly when Maddie requested chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast the next day. And this, she said, pushing open a heavy door, is Daddy's office. We're not supposed to go in without permission. The office was impressive. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and a massive desk positioned to overlook the gardens. It felt like the inner sanctum of power, where billion-dollar decisions were made with the stroke of a pen. Then we should probably head back out, I suggested gently. Maddie nodded, closing the door carefully. Daddy says important papers live in there, papers that keep our family safe. The first few days fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were for breakfast and lessons with her tutor, Dr. Reynolds, a kindly older gentleman who spoke to Maddie as if she were his intellectual equal. Afternoons were for outdoor activities when weather permitted or arts and crafts in. The sunroom when it didn't. Evenings were for dinner, bath time, and bedtime stories, her favorite part of the day. It was during those quiet moments, with Maddie tucked under her princess canopy bed, that she began to truly open up to me. My mommy used to read this one, she said on the third night, handing me a worn copy of The Secret Garden. She did all the voices. I tried my best with the voices, earning a small giggle when I attempted the gruff Yorkshire accent of Ben Weatherstaff. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh, a sound so pure it made my chest ache. "Miss Caroline?" she asked as I was about to turn out the light. "Yes, sweetie." "Do you have a mommy and daddy?" The question caught me off guard. I did. My daddy passed away when I was in college. My mom lives in Florida. Now, do you miss your daddy? I nodded, sitting back down on the edge of her bed. "Every day." "Me too," she whispered. "I miss my mommy every day." On the morning of the fourth day, the dynamic in the house shifted. I was helping Maddie with a watercolor painting when the front door opened, and two people swept in as if they owned the place. "Maddie, darling!" A woman with a sleek blonde bob and a designer suit crouched down, arms outstretched. Maddie accepted the hug with polite restraint. "Hello, Miss Avery." Behind her stood a man who bore a faint resemblance to Samuel. The same jawline, but softer somehow, with none of Samuel's intensity. He ruffled Maddie's hair with casual familiarity. "How's my favorite niece?" he asked, though I knew from Maddie that she wasn't actually his. Niece. Richard was Samuel's cousin, not his brother. "I'm your only niece, Uncle Richard," she replied with that matter-of-fact tone she sometimes used. Richard laughed too loudly, then turned his attention to me. His gaze traveled from my face downward in a way that made me instinctively cross my arms. "You must be the new nanny," he said, extending his hand. "Richard Whitmore. I keep this. Family's business affairs running while my cousin deals with the big picture stuff." "Caroline Hayes," I replied, noticing how he emphasized his last name, as if to remind me of his connection to wealth and power. Avery didn't bother introducing herself. Instead, she surveyed the room with critical eyes. "We need to discuss some matters with Lydia. Come along, Richard." They disappeared into another part of the house, but their arrival had disrupted the peaceful atmosphere. For the rest of the day, I felt watched. Lydia appeared more frequently, checking on us under the guise of offering snacks or adjusting the thermostat. Twice, I caught Richard staring at me from doorways or across the garden. That night, after tucking Maddie in, I was heading back to my room when I heard voices. From Samuel's office. Voices that should not have been there. "Samuel trusts too easily," Richard was saying. "Always has. It's his one weakness in business and in life." "The board meeting is in 10 days, Avery replied. "We need to move quickly if we're going to present the restructuring plan." "And what about the nanny? She seems attached to Madeline already." "She's just the help, Richard. A temporary inconvenience." I stepped back quietly, heart pounding. I wasn't supposed to hear this conversation, wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Samuel's office. I retreated to my room, trying to make sense of what I'd overheard. Business discussions weren't unusual, of course. Richard was part of the company, but something in their tone, in the way they spoke about Samuel, felt wrong. The next morning, Avery cornered me in the kitchen while Maddie was with her piano teacher. "Caroline," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes, "I hope you're finding everything satisfactory." "Very much so," I replied cautiously. Good. She tapped perfectly manicured nails against the marble countertop. "You know, Samuel is very particular about Madeline's care. He values loyalty above all else." "I understand that. Do you?" Her smile tightened. "Because loyalty sometimes means knowing what conversations shouldn't leave these walls, what might worry Samuel unnecessarily while he's focusing on critical business matters." The threat was veiled but clear. I nodded slowly. "I'm here to take care of Maddie. That's my only concern." "Excellent." She patted my arm condescendingly. "We'll get along just fine then." But as she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just been warned or threatened. What had I stumbled into? What was happening in this beautiful, cold mansion that required such loyalty? That night, I dreamed of locked doors and whispered conversations. And somewhere in those dreams, a small voice was trying to tell me something important, something I needed to hear before it was too late. I woke the next morning with that unsettling conversation still echoing in my mind. Something was happening beneath the polished surface of the Whitmore household, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it somehow involved me, a temporary nanny who should have been invisible to the power players in Samuel's world. After helping Maddie dress for the day, we headed downstairs for breakfast. The kitchen was unusually crowded. Richard sat at the island scrolling through his phone, while Lydia and Avery spoke in hushed tones by the coffee machine. All three fell silent when we entered. "Good morning," I said brightly, pretending not to notice the tension. "Morning," Richard replied, his smile too wide. "Any plans with our little princess today?" "We're going to feed the ducks," Maddie announced, climbing onto a stool. "Miss Caroline promised." I nodded, pouring Maddie a glass of orange juice. "There's a pond on the east side of the property. Mr. Whitmore mentioned it was one of Maddie's favorite spots." "Did he now?" Avery exchanged a glance with Richard. How attentive of him to share such details. Chef Anton appeared with Maddie's chocolate chip pancakes, effectively ending the awkward conversation. As we ate, I noticed Richard studying me with a calculated interest that made me uncomfortable. "Miss Hayes," he said finally, "I was wondering if you might join me for a brief chat after breakfast. Nothing formal, just want to make sure you have everything you need." Something in his tone told me this wasn't optional. "Of course," I replied, "as long as Maddie doesn't mind postponing our duck feeding for a bit." Maddie looked between us, her small brow furrowed. "Uncle Richard always has brief chats with people," she observed. "And they're never brief." Richard's laugh sounded forced. "Out of the mouths of babes, eh? Smart as a whip, just like her father." After breakfast, I left Maddie with her art supplies and followed Richard to a small study off the main hallway. Unlike Samuel's imposing office, this room felt like a poor imitation, trying too hard to project importance. "Please sit." He gestured to a leather chair as he closed the door behind us. I perched on the edge of the seat, keeping my posture straight. "Is everything all right, Mr. Whitmore?" "Richard, please." He leaned against the desk, looming over me slightly. "And yes, everything's fine. I just wanted to check in. Caring for Madeline can be challenging. She's not like other children." "She's wonderful," I said firmly. "Bright, thoughtful, and remarkably resilient considering what she's been through." He nodded slowly. "Yes, losing Elizabeth was hard on all of us, especially Samuel. He hasn't been the same since more withdrawn, more suspicious. Sometimes I worry about his decision-making." I stayed silent, unsure where this was heading. "Did Samuel mention anything to you about company matters? About the board meeting in New York, perhaps?" The question felt like a trap. "No. Mr. Whitmore was very clear that my responsibility is solely Maddie's well-being." Of course, of course." He waved dismissively. "It's just that Samuel sometimes confides in the wrong people, shares sensitive information inappropriately. It's caused problems in the past." I wouldn't know anything about that. Richard studied me for a moment, then abruptly changed tactics. "You were let go from your teaching position, correct? Budget cuts?" The sudden shift caught me off guard. "Yes, that's right. Shame. Teaching is such a noble profession. Underpaid, undervalued." He sighed dramatically. "You know, Langston Capital has a substantial educational foundation. We fund teacher training, classroom resources, even direct hiring in underserved districts." I understood the implication immediately. He was dangling potential employment, a way back to my career. In exchange for what? "That sounds like important work," I said, carefully. "It is. And we're always looking for experienced educators to join our team. The salary is considerable. Benefits exceptional. Something to think about, perhaps?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Especially for someone in your financial situation." Before I could respond, a small knock interrupted us. The door cracked open, and Maddie's face appeared. "Miss Caroline, are you done?" "Yet? The ducks are waiting." Relief washed over me. "Yes, we're finished. Mr. Whitmore and I were just wrapping up." Richard's jaw tightened momentarily before he forced another smile. "Of course. Don't keep those ducks waiting on my account." As I took Maddie's hand and headed for the garden, I could feel Richard's eyes following us. The conversation had been more than a chat. It had been a reconnaissance mission, and potentially a bribe. The duck pond provided a welcome escape from the house's growing tension. Maddie happily tossed breadcrumbs to the eager waterfowl, giggling when they quacked demandingly for more. "Uncle Richard doesn't like ducks," she informed me matter-of-factly. "He says they're greedy and make too much noise." "Maybe he just hasn't spent enough time with, them," I suggested, watching a mother duck guide her ducklings in a perfect line. Maddie considered this. Maybe. Or maybe he just doesn't like things he can't control. I glanced down at her, startled by the insight. "That's a very grown-up observation." She shrugged. "I hear things. People think I don't understand, but I do." She tossed another piece of bread. Daddy says I have good ears and a better brain. Your daddy's right about that. We fell silent for a moment, enjoying the peaceful scene. Then Maddie spoke again, her voice quieter. Miss Caroline, do you like it here? Of course I do. Your home is beautiful. That's not what I meant. She turned those serious eyes toward me. Do you like being with me? My heart melted a little. I love being with you, Maddie. You're my favorite 5-year-old in the whole world. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face. Good, because I want you to stay, even after Daddy comes home. Oh, sweetie. I crouched down to her level. This is just a temporary job. Your daddy will come home, and things will go back to normal. Her smile faded. Nothing's been normal since Mommy died. That evening, after Maddie was asleep, I found myself restless. The house felt different with Richard and Avery staying overnight in the guest wing. Voices carried down hallways, doors opened and closed at odd hours, and twice I thought I heard someone near my room. Unable to sleep, I slipped downstairs for a cup of tea. The kitchen was dark and quiet, but as I waited for the kettle, I noticed a sliver of light beneath Samuel's office door. Someone was in there, someone who shouldn't be. I hesitated, torn between minding my own business and investigating. Curiosity won. I approached silently, careful to avoid the creaky floorboard I'd discovered earlier. Through the slightly ajar door, I could see Avery at Samuel's computer, scrolling through files while Richard rifled through a drawer. Here it is, Richard whispered, triumphantly, holding up a document. The proxy agreement. Avery joined him, scanning the paper. He actually did it. I didn't think he'd go through with it. Samuel's always been sentimental, protecting Madeline's interests and all that. Richard's voice dripped with contempt. But naming an outsider as a temporary proxy? That's beyond reckless. This nanny has no idea what he's done, does she? Avery's voice was coldly amused. No, and she doesn't need to know until the papers are signed. Once Samuel agrees to the psychiatric evaluation, we'll have legal grounds to challenge the proxy designation. My blood ran cold. Psychiatric evaluation? Proxy designation? What were they talking about? The board will back us, Avery was saying. They're already concerned about his decision-making since Elizabeth died. One more questionable choice, like putting a random nanny in charge of Madeline's voting shares, will be enough to trigger the succession clause. And then, Richard's voice was smug, Langston Capital gets new leadership, the kind it deserves. I backed away silently, heart pounding. I needed to think, needed to understand what I'd just heard. But one thing was clear. Samuel Whitmore had done something that put him at risk, and somehow, inexplicably, it involved me. Back in my room, I sat by the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens while my mind raced. Why would Samuel name me, a virtual stranger, as any kind of proxy for his daughter? It made no sense. Unless he didn't trust the people closest to him. Unless he suspected exactly what I had just witnessed. A soft knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I opened it cautiously to find Maddie standing there in her princess pajamas, clutching a stuffed elephant. I had a bad dream, she whispered. I ushered her in, closing the door behind her. Do you want to talk about it? She climbed onto my bed, hugging the elephant tighter. I dreamed that Daddy didn't come home. That Uncle Richard took his office and his car and said he was in charge now. I sat beside her, stroking her hair. It was just a dream, sweetheart. Your daddy will be home soon. She looked up at me, eyes glistening with tears. Uncle Richard and Miss Avery were in Daddy's office tonight. They were looking at his special papers. My heart stopped. You saw them? She nodded. I was going to get water. They didn't see me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Miss Caroline, they said they want to put you in a hospital. They said if Daddy signs the papers, they can take your shares. Uncle Richard said it's the only way to keep the company. In that moment, everything changed. This wasn't just corporate politics or family tension. This was a deliberate plot, and somehow I had become central to it. I held Maddie close, mind racing with implications. It's going to be okay, I promised, though I had no idea how I would keep that promise. No one's going to a hospital, and your daddy will be home before you know it. But as Maddie eventually drifted to sleep in my arms, I stared into the darkness, a cold realization settling over me. I was standing between greedy people and a fortune, and they planned to make me disappear. Morning arrived with a weight of knowledge I wasn't prepared to carry. As I helped Maddie dress for the day, my mind cataloged everything I'd learned. Samuel had apparently named me as some kind of proxy shareholder for Maddie's interests. Richard and Avery planned to have Samuel undergo a psychiatric evaluation, undoubtedly rigged, to prove he was unfit to make decisions. And once that happened, my shares would be taken away, and Richard would seize control of Langston Capital. The most pressing question was, why me? Why would Samuel entrust a part of his empire to a woman he barely knew? "You're thinking really hard," Maddie observed as I absent-mindedly buttoned her cardigan wrong. "Your forehead gets crinkly when you think too much." I smiled, fixing the buttons. "Just planning our day, sweetie." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me but was willing to play along. "Can we have a picnic? By the duck pond?" "That sounds perfect." The morning passed in a haze of forced normalcy. I helped Maddie with her reading lesson while keeping one eye on the doorway, half expecting Richard or Avery to appear with accusations or threats. But the house remained quiet, too quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath. By lunchtime, I'd made a decision. I needed to contact Samuel. Whatever game was being played in his absence, he needed to know about it. "Lydia." I approached the housekeeper as she arranged flowers in the foyer. "I need to reach Mr. Whitmore about a matter concerning Maddie. Do you have his direct contact information?" She stiffened. "Mr. Whitmore left strict instructions not to be disturbed. His itinerary is quite demanding." "I understand, but this is important. All communications should go through Ms. Maxwell," she replied, referring to Avery. "She's managing his schedule and will determine if your concern warrants interrupting him." In other words, I had no way to reach Samuel without going through the very people I needed to warn him about. "I see. Thank you." I turned to leave, then paused. "Lydia, how long have you worked for the Whitmore family?" The question seemed to surprise her. 27 years. I was here when Samuel was a boy." "So you knew his parents? And watched him grow up?" Something flickered in her eyes. A softening, perhaps. "I did. This house was different then. Warmer." She glanced around as if the walls might be listening. "Mrs. Whitmore, Samuel's mother. She filled this place with music and laughter. After she passed, everything changed. I studied her, wondering if I might have found an ally." "And what do you think of Richard?" Her expression closed immediately. "It's not my place to have opinions about family matters." She picked up her flower arrangement. "If you'll excuse me." So much for potential allies. I was on my own. For our picnic, I packed sandwiches, fruit, and cookies from the kitchen, along with a blanket from the linen closet. As we headed toward the pond, I spotted Richard watching us from a second-floor window. I waved cheerfully, as if I had no concerns in the world. The duck pond offered a measure of privacy, far enough from the main house that we couldn't be easily overheard. As Maddie happily fed crusts to the ducks, I tried to piece together a plan. "Maddie," I began carefully, "does your daddy ever talk to you about his company? About what happens if he's not there?" She nodded, tossing another crust. "He says the company takes care of people, and someday it will be my job to make sure it keeps taking care of people." She glanced up at me. "But not until I'm really old, like 25. I smiled despite my anxiety. "And did he ever mention anything about shares? Or someone who might help take care of things until you're old enough?" She concentrated, clearly trying to remember. "He said he made a special plan to keep me safe, that if anything happened to him, I would always be protected." She lowered her voice, conspiratorially. "He said Uncle Richard would never be in charge of me or my money." The pieces were starting to fit together. Samuel didn't trust his cousin, with good reason, apparently, and had taken steps to protect Maddie's inheritance. Somehow I had become part of that protection plan. "Maddie, when did you hear Richard and Avery talking about me? About hospitals and shares?" 2 nights. Ago. They were in Daddy's office really late. I couldn't sleep because my elephant was thirsty. I suppressed a smile at the excuse. "And they didn't see you?" She shook her head solemnly. "I'm very good at hiding. Daddy and I play hide and seek all the time." As we packed up our picnic, a plan began forming in my mind. I needed evidence, something concrete to show Samuel when he returned, and I needed to protect myself from whatever Richard and Avery were plotting. When we returned to the house, Avery was waiting in the foyer, tapping her foot impatiently. "There you are," she said, her smile tight. "Richard and I need to discuss some household matters with you, Caroline. Madeline can spend some time with Lydia." "Actually," I replied smoothly, "Maddie and I were about to start her art project." Her tutor specifically requested she complete it before their next session. Avery's smile froze. This won't take long. It's rather important. I matched her faux politeness. As is Maddie's education. Perhaps after dinner? I'm sure that would work better for everyone. For a moment, I thought she might argue. Instead, she nodded stiffly. Fine. 8 o'clock in the study. Don't be late. As she walked away, Maddie squeezed my hand. You didn't want to go with her, she observed quietly. I didn't want to leave you, I corrected, leading her toward the sunroom where her art supplies were set up. The afternoon passed in a blur of watercolors and children's stories, but my mind was elsewhere, plotting, preparing for what I suspected would be an ambush rather than a discussion. By dinner time, I had formulated a risky plan. After tucking Maddie in, I returned to my room to prepare for my meeting with Richard and Avery. I needed something they wouldn't expect, a way to level the playing field. At exactly 8 o'clock, I knocked on the study door, cell phone tucked discreetly in my pocket with the voice recorder running. Richard opened the door, all smiles and false charm. Caroline, thank you for joining us. Please, sit down. The study felt smaller than before, more claustrophobic. Avery sat in a leather chair, a folder open on her lap. Richard remained standing, positioning himself between me and the door. We wanted to discuss something delicate, Avery began, concerning Samuel and your role here. I kept my expression neutral. I'm listening. We've noticed some concerning behaviors, Richard interjected. Confusion, forgetfulness, perhaps even some inappropriate attachments. From Mr. Whitmore? I asked innocently. No, Caroline. Avery's voice hardened. From you. And there it was, the trap I'd been expecting. I folded my hands in my lap to hide their trembling. I'm not sure I understand. Richard sighed dramatically. Several staff members have reported concerning incidents. You wandering the halls at night, searching through Samuel's office, making strange comments to Madeline about the company. That's not true, I said firmly. We have statements. Avery pushed a document toward me. And given your history, we're concerned. I glanced at the paper, my blood running cold. It detailed a fabricated mental health history, anxiety disorders, paranoid episodes, even a hospitalization that never happened. This is fiction, I said, pushing it back toward her. I've never been hospitalized for mental health issues. Records can be misinterpreted, Richard said smoothly. The important thing is getting you the help you need. We've arranged for a facility nearby. Very discreet, excellent care. I stood up, heart pounding. I'm not going to any facility. My contract is with Mr. Whitmore, and I'll remain here until he returns. Avery's smile was cold. Your contract includes a clause allowing for termination if your behavior poses any risk to Madeline. We believe it does. Maddie is perfectly safe with me, and she'll tell you the same. Children can be manipulated, Richard said darkly, especially by unstable adults. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I think we're done here. I'm going back to my room, and in the morning, I'll continue caring for Maddie as her father instructed. If you have concerns, take them up with Mr. Whitmore when he returns. As I turned to leave, Richard grabbed my arm. This isn't a negotiation, Caroline. You're leaving tonight, either voluntarily to receive treatment or escorted off the property for trespassing. Your choice. I pulled away from his grip. Don't touch me again. My voice was calmer than I felt. And don't threaten me. You have no legal right to remove me from this house. Actually, Avery interjected, as Samuel's designated proxy during his absence, Richard has every right. And there it was, the final piece of the puzzle. Richard wasn't just after control of the company. He was claiming he already had it. That's interesting, I said, moving toward the door. Because according to what I overheard the other night, Mr. Whitmore designated someone else as proxy. Someone you're very eager to get rid of. Their faces told me everything I needed to know. I'd guessed correctly. You have no idea what you're talking about, Richard hissed. Don't I? I reached the door, my hand on the knob. I think Mr. Whitmore will be very interested to hear about this conversation when he returns. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a little girl to look after. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I'd won this round, but the war was just beginning. And somehow I needed to survive the next 3 days until Samuel Whitmore returned home. Back in my room, I locked the door and replayed the recording, making sure it had captured everything. Then I sent it to my email account as backup. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof that they were plotting against me, fabricating mental health issues to discredit me. Now I just needed to figure out why Samuel had made me Maddie's proxy in the first place, and how to protect both of us until he returned. Morning light filtered through my curtains, waking me from a fitful sleep. I'd spent most of the night researching proxy shareholders on my phone, trying to understand what Samuel might have done. From what I could gather, he had likely named me as a temporary voting proxy for Maddie's trust shares, a placeholder to prevent Richard from gaining control while Samuel was away. But why me? A virtual stranger with no business experience or connections to the corporate world? Perhaps that was exactly the point. I had no agenda, no stake in company politics. I was a clean slate, chosen precisely because I was an outsider. I dressed quickly, listening for any unusual sounds in the hallway. The confrontation with Richard and Avery had escalated the situation dramatically. They now knew that I understood their plan, which made me an active threat rather than a mere inconvenience. When I opened my door, I found Lydia standing there, hand raised as if about to knock. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound normal despite my racing heart. Her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Richard has requested that Madeline spend the day with him. He's taking her to the stables for riding lessons." "That wasn't on her schedule," I protested. "Plans change," she replied flatly. "He's her uncle." "He's her father's cousin," I corrected, "and Mr. Whitmore left me in charge of her care." Something flickered in Lydia's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or a hint of divided loyalty. "Miss Hayes, may I speak frankly?" I nodded, surprised by the shift in her tone. "I've served this family for nearly 3 decades. I've seen patterns repeat themselves." She glanced down the hallway to ensure we were alone. "The Whitmore men have always fought for control. It's in their blood. Samuel's father against his brother, and now Samuel against Richard. And which side are you on, Lydia?" Her mouth tightened. "I'm on the side of that little girl. She's lost." "Enough already." She hesitated, then added, "Richard is already with Madeline. He arrived at her room early. They're having breakfast in the garden." My stomach dropped. "Thank you for telling me." As she turned to leave, I took a chance. "Lydia, does the name Caroline Hayes mean anything to you? In relation to Langston Capital or Maddie's trust?" She froze momentarily. "You should ask Mr. Whitmore that question." "I would if I could reach him." She studied me for a long moment. "There's a private line in the greenhouse office. Samuel uses it when he wants to avoid monitoring. The number is taped under the desk drawer." With that cryptic information, she walked away, leaving me stunned. Had she just offered me a lifeline, or was it another trap? I headed downstairs, following the sound of childish laughter to the garden terrace. Richard sat across from Maddie at a wrought iron table, animatedly telling a story while she giggled at his exaggerated gestures. He looked up as I approached, his smile faltering slightly. "Good morning, Uncle Richard," I said pleasantly. "I didn't realize Maddie had riding lessons today." "Last-minute arrangement," he replied smoothly. "The instructor had an opening, and I thought it would be good for Maddie to get out of the house." Maddie looked between us, sensing the undercurrent of tension. "Can Miss Caroline come too?" she asked hopefully. Richard's smile tightened. "I'm afraid not, sweetheart. The stables only allow family members during private lessons. Insurance reasons, you understand." I kept my expression neutral despite the obvious lie. "That's all right, Maddie. We can do something special when you get back. Maybe finish that book we started?" She nodded, though her enthusiasm had dimmed. "Promise?" "Cross my heart." Richard stood, placing a possessive hand on Maddie's shoulder. "We should get going. The instructor doesn't like to be kept waiting." As they walked toward the driveway where a sleek Range Rover waited, Maddie glanced back at me, a question in her eyes. I gave her a reassuring smile, though inside I was anything but reassured. Richard was isolating her from me, the first step in what I feared would be an escalating campaign to separate us completely. Once they were gone, I headed straight for the greenhouse. It sat at the far edge of the formal gardens, a beautiful Victorian structure of glass and wrought iron. Inside, tropical plants and rare orchids created a humid, fragrant oasis. At the back, a small office was tucked behind a stand of bamboo. Samuel's private retreat, according to Lydia. The office was simple but elegant. A desk, 2 chairs, and bookshelves filled with botanical texts. I checked under the desk drawer as instructed and found a small piece of tape with a phone. Number written in precise handwriting. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number on my cell phone, half expecting it to be disconnected or answered by one of Richard's allies. Instead, after 2 rings, I heard Samuel Whitmore's voice. This is a private line. Identify yourself. Mr. Whitmore, it's Caroline Hayes. I'm calling about Maddie. A pause. Is she all right? She's fine, physically, but there are complications. Richard and Avery have been acting strangely. They tried to convince me I have mental health issues and should be institutionalized. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. Explain. Everything. I took a deep breath and told him what I'd discovered. The late-night office invasion, the conversation about proxy shares, the manufactured mental health history, and Richard's attempt to isolate Maddie. They're planning something, Mr. Whitmore, something that involves discrediting you through a psychiatric evaluation and removing me from the picture. I see. His tone was measured, controlled. And what do you think they're after, Miss Hayes? The question caught me off guard. I assume control of the company. Richard mentioned something about a succession clause. Yes, he would focus on that. Samuel sighed. Miss Hayes, I owe you an explanation, but not over the phone. I'll be returning tomorrow evening, a day earlier than planned. Until then, I need you to do something for me. Of course. In my office behind the painting of the Blue Ridge Mountains, there's a safe. The combination is Madeline's. Birthday. Month, day, year, no spaces. Inside, you'll find a red folder marked Proxy Designation. I need you to read it. All of it. Then you'll understand why they're so desperate to remove you. My heart raced. Mr. Whitmore, they've been in your office. They may have already found it. The document in the safe is the original. What they found was a decoy. Enough information to worry them, not enough to give them the full picture. His voice hardened. One more thing. Don't let Richard separate you from Madeline. Whatever excuse he gives, whatever story he invents, stay with her. He won't hurt her. She's too valuable to his plans. But he will try to turn her against you. I understand. Good. I'll be there by 7 tomorrow evening. Until then, trust no one except Lydia. She's loyal too. This family, the true family, not Richard's vision of it. The line went dead, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. I needed to see that document. I made my way back to the main house, planning my next move. The morning stretched ahead, empty without Maddie. It was the perfect opportunity to access Samuel's office, but also the riskiest time. With Maddie gone, the others would be watching me closely. Sure enough, as I entered through the kitchen, Avery was waiting, leaning against the counter with a coffee cup in hand. Enjoying the gardens? She asked, her tone deceptively casual. Just getting some fresh air, I replied. The greenhouse is beautiful. She studied me over the rim of her cup. Richard thought it might be best if you took the day off. You seemed stressed last night. We're concerned about your well-being. That's thoughtful but unnecessary. I'm fine. Nevertheless, her smile was cold. We've arranged for you to have a consultation with a specialist. Just a checkup, really. The car will arrive at noon. So that was their next move. Force me to see their chosen specialist who would undoubtedly find me unfit to care for Maddie, or manage any proxy responsibilities. I appreciate the concern, I said carefully, but I'd prefer to wait for Mr. Whitmore's return before making any medical appointments. It wasn't a request, Caroline. All pretense of friendliness vanished from her voice. Either you go willingly, or security will escort you. Richard was quite clear. I needed to buy time. I understand. Noon, you said. Be ready. She seemed surprised by my acquiescence, clearly having expected more resistance. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable. As she walked away, I checked my watch. It was just after 9, giving me less than 3 hours to access the safe, read the document, and figure out an escape plan before their specialist arrived. I headed upstairs, brain racing. First problem, getting into Samuel's office undetected. The house was quiet, but I knew Avery was somewhere nearby, likely watching my movements. I needed a distraction. Remembering Maddie's tendency to leave toys scattered around her room, I formulated a plan. I entered her bedroom and quickly located her favorite stuffed elephant on her bed. Taking it with me, I made my way toward Samuel's office, moving with purpose. Halfway there, I encountered Lydia. Miss Hayes, she said, eyeing the elephant. Can I help you with something? Keeping my voice loud enough to be overheard, I explained. Maddie was upset about forgetting Mr. Ellie. She called from the stables and asked if I could bring him. Richard said he'd meet me at the front door. Lydia's eyes flickered with understanding. Of course. I believe I saw Mr. Richard waiting in the kitchen just now. The perfect distraction. Thank you, Lydia. I headed toward the kitchen, making sure my footsteps were audible. Once I was certain Avery would follow to investigate, I doubled back quickly, slipping into Samuel's office and closing the door silently behind me. The Blue Ridge Mountains painting hung on the wall behind his desk, a stunning landscape in oils, depicting misty peaks at dawn. I carefully lifted it away from the wall, revealing a sleek wall safe. With trembling fingers, I entered Maddie's birthday, 11/27/2019. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Inside were several folders, organized with meticulous precision. The red one was immediately visible, labeled exactly as Samuel had described. I removed it carefully, then closed the safe and replaced the painting. Sitting at Samuel's desk, I opened the folder and began to read, my eyes widening with each paragraph. The document was indeed a proxy designation, but it was far more than that. Samuel had created an elaborate trust structure for Langston Capital, with Maddie's inheritance protected by a network of legal safeguards. And at the center of it all was an unexpected name, mine. Not just as a temporary voting proxy, but as Maddie's designated guardian should anything happen to Samuel. The final page contained a personal letter, dated just 3 days before I was hired. To whom it may concern, if you are reading this, you are likely questioning my decision to name Caroline Hayes as both proxy voter for the Whitmore Family Trust shares and contingent guardian for my daughter, Madeline Elizabeth Whitmore. My decision may seem impulsive to those who do not know me well. It is not. For the past year, I have been quietly investigating candidates for this position, individuals with no connection to Langston Capital, no existing relationship with the Whitmore family, and most importantly, a demonstrated history of ethical decision-making and genuine care for children. Ms. Hayes' record as an educator, her character references, and her background check revealed exactly the qualities I sought: integrity, compassion, and moral courage. The fact that she is unknown to my cousin Richard and his allies is not incidental. It is essential to my plan. I have reason to believe attempts will be made to seize control of Langston Capital upon my death or incapacitation, using my daughter as a pawn. This document ensures that should anything happen to me, Madeline will be protected by someone whose only motivation is her well-being, not corporate control. Samuel Whitmore. I sat back, stunned. Samuel hadn't chosen me at random. He'd investigated me, selected me specifically for this role. But why? What threat did he perceive that required such elaborate precautions? The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted me back to reality. I quickly replaced the folder in the safe, reset the combination, and positioned myself near the bookshelf, pulling out a volume as the door opened. Avery stood in the doorway, eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What are you doing in here?" I held up the book, a collection of fairy tales, looking for something to read to Maddie when she returns. I remembered Mr. Whitmore mentioning she loved these stories. She didn't believe me, that much was obvious from her expression, but she couldn't prove I'd done anything wrong. "This office is private," she said coldly. "You should leave." "Of course." I replaced the book and walked past her. "I need to prepare for my appointment. Noon, correct?" Her eyes followed me down the hallway, but I didn't look back. My mind was racing with new information and a growing sense of urgency. I now understood why Richard and Avery were so desperate to remove me. It wasn't just about temporary proxy voting rights. It was about long-term control of Langston Capital through Maddie. Samuel had created a system that kept them permanently at arm's length from his daughter's inheritance, and I was the linchpin holding it all together. I checked my watch again. 10:30 a.m. I had exactly 90 minutes to figure out how to avoid their specialist and protect Maddie until Samuel returned. Time was running out. I returned to my room and quickly packed a small bag with essentials, a change of clothes, my phone charger, and the few personal items I'd brought to the Whitmore estate. I had no intention of getting into any car at noon, but I needed to make it appear that I was cooperating until the last possible moment. As I zipped up my bag, a soft knock at the door made me freeze. I approached cautiously, calling out, "Who is it?" "It's Lydia." I opened the door to find the housekeeper looking uncharacteristically agitated. "Miss Hayes, I thought you should—" "No, Richard just called. He's not bringing Madeline back until this evening. He claims the writing instructor suggested an extended lesson." My stomach dropped. "Did you speak to Maddie?" "No, he wouldn't put her on the phone." Lydia's voice lowered. And there's something else. The specialist Avery mentioned, he's already here, waiting in the library. They moved up the timeline. Ice ran through my veins. They were accelerating their plan, cutting off my options one by one. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. Lydia, do you have a car? She hesitated, then nodded. My Honda is parked behind the service entrance. I need to leave, now, and find Richard and Maddie. Do you know which stables they went to? Oak Ridge Equestrian Center. It's about 20 minutes from here. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Take my car. I'll tell them you're in the shower, buy you some time. I took the keys, overcome with gratitude. Why are you helping me? Her expression softened slightly. Because I've watched Richard scheme his way through this family for decades, and because... She hesitated. Samuel called me this morning. He said to trust you. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. The service entrance is through the kitchen, past the pantry. Go now, while Avery is occupied with the doctor. I grabbed my bag and followed her directions, heart pounding as I made my way through the labyrinthine back hallways of the mansion. The kitchen was mercifully empty. Chef Anton must have been on his break, and I slipped out the service door without being seen. Lydia's modest Honda was parked exactly where she'd said it would be. I threw my bag in the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away from the Whitmore estate, watching the imposing mansion shrink in the rearview mirror. Using my phone's GPS, I navigated toward Oak Ridge Equestrian Center, a private riding facility that catered to Nashville's elite. As I drove, I tried calling Samuel's private line again, but it went straight to voicemail. He was likely in meetings or on a flight back to Tennessee. The equestrian center appeared around a bend in the road, a sprawling complex of pristine white fences, manicured pastures, and elegant stables. I parked in the visitor lot and approached the main office, a charming clapboard building with hanging flower baskets flanking the maw entrance. Inside, a woman in riding attire looked up from her computer. Can I help you? Yes, I'm looking for Madeline Whitmore. She's having a lesson today with her uncle. The woman frowned slightly. Whitmore? I don't believe we have any Whitmores scheduled today. My heart sank. Are you sure? Richard Whitmore would have made the arrangement. 5-year-old girl, probably a private lesson? She shook her head. We don't have any 5-year-olds on the schedule at all today. Our youngest rider is 7, and she's not here until this afternoon. Richard had lied. They weren't at Oak Ridge at all. Thank you, I managed, turning to leave as panic began to rise in my chest. Back in the car, I tried to think clearly. If they weren't at Oak Ridge, where would Richard take Maddie? And more. Importantly, why lie about their destination? The answer came with chilling clarity. He needed time. Time to implement whatever contingency plan he'd developed when it became clear I wasn't going to cooperate with their specialist appointment. I called Lydia, who answered in a hushed voice. They know you've left, she said without preamble. Avery is furious. She's called Richard, but I couldn't hear what they discussed. They weren't at Oak Ridge, I told her. He lied about where he was taking Maddie. Any idea where else he might go? There was a pause. Richard has a lake house on Old Hickory Lake. It's about 40 minutes north of here. Samuel mentioned once that Richard took Madeline there for fishing last summer. Do you have the address? No, but it's in a gated community. Called Lakeside Haven. You'd need a code to get through the main entrance. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. Thank you, Lydia. Please call if you hear anything about their plans. I programmed the GPS for Lakeside Haven and pulled back onto the road, pushing the Honda faster than I'd normally dare. As I drove, my mind raced through scenarios, each more concerning than the last. Richard wouldn't hurt Maddie, of that I was certain. She was his ticket to controlling Langston Capital, but he might try to manipulate her, turn her against me or even against her father. The gates of Lakeside Haven appeared after 40 tense minutes of driving. A security guard approached my car as I pulled up to the checkpoint. I'm here to see Richard Whitmore, I said with as much confidence as I could muster. He's expecting me. The guard checked his clipboard. Name? Caroline Hayes. He scanned the list, then shook his head. You're not on today's visitor log, ma'am. I feigned surprise. That's odd. He just called me to come right away. Something about his niece being upset. I pulled out my phone as if checking a message. He's at Lakefront Drive. I think he said number 15. The guard's expression softened slightly at the mention of an upset child. 15 Lakefront is the Whitmore property. Yes. Let me call and confirm you're expected. My heart sank. If he called Richard, my plan would fall apart immediately. Please do, I said, keeping my voice steady. Tell him it's Caroline, Maddie's nanny. She left her stuffed elephant in my car this morning, and she was quite upset about it. I reached for my bag and pulled out Maddie's stuffed elephant, which I'd grabbed from her room earlier. The guard's expression relaxed at the sight of the well-loved toy. One moment, he said, stepping back into his booth to make the call. I held my breath, preparing myself for rejection or worse, Richard coming to the gate himself. But after a brief conversation, the guard, returned and handed me a visitor pass. Mr. Whitmore says to come right up. The little girl's been asking for that elephant. Relief washed over me. Thank you so much. I drove through the gates, following the winding road along the shoreline. Lakefront Drive curved around a pristine cove, revealing a series of luxury homes with private docks extending into the water. Number 15 was near the end, a modern cedar and glass structure perched on a bluff overlooking the lake. Richard's Range Rover sat in the circular driveway. I parked behind it and approached the front door, elephant in hand, trying to project calm confidence despite my racing heart. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Richard stood there, his forced smile barely concealing his shock at seeing me. Caroline, he said, voice tight. What a surprise. I brought Mr. Ellie, I replied, holding up the stuffed elephant. Lydia mentioned Maddie was upset about forgetting him. His eyes narrowed slightly. How thoughtful. And how did you find us? I don't recall mentioning where we were going. Lydia gave me directions. She said you bring Maddie here often. Richard hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he stepped aside. Come in. Maddie's on the deck. I entered cautiously, scanning my surroundings. The lake house was luxurious, but more relaxed than the main estate. Open-plan living areas with comfortable furniture and large windows showcasing the water view. Through the glass doors, I could see Maddie sitting at a table on the deck, coloring in a book. Maddie, I called, stepping onto the deck. Look who I brought. She looked up, her face lighting with genuine joy. Mr. Ellie. She ran to me, taking the elephant and hugging it tightly before wrapping her arms around my waist. I thought I left him at home. How did you know? Just a hunch, I said, stroking her hair. Are you having a good day with your uncle? It's okay. We didn't really go horseback riding. Uncle Richard said the horses were sick today. I felt Richard's presence behind me. A last-minute cancellation, he explained smoothly. I thought we'd have a nice day at the lake instead. That sounds lovely, I said, keeping my tone light. But I'm afraid we need to head back to the house. Your father called. He's coming home early. Tonight, in fact. Maddie's eyes widened with excitement. Daddy's coming. Home? Richard's hand clamped down on my shoulder. That's impossible. Samuel's schedule is set through tomorrow evening. I turned to face him, removing his hand from my shoulder. Plans change. He called the house looking for Maddie. Lydia told him where we were. The lie was calculated to let Richard know we weren't alone in this. Someone else knew where we were. His expression darkened, momentarily before he regained his composure. Well, that's wonderful news. But there's no rush. I can bring Madeline back this evening. You must be tired from the drive. Actually, I replied, Mr. Whitmore specifically asked me to bring Maddie back. He mentioned something about both of us needing to be there when he arrives. Richard's jaw tightened. We both knew what I was implying. Samuel wanted his proxy and his daughter waiting for him. Together. I see. His voice was cold. Well, if my cousin insists, who am I to argue? Madeline, sweetheart, go pack up your coloring books. It seems we're cutting our lake day short. Maddie looked between us, sensing the tension. Can Miss Caroline help me? Of course, I said quickly, taking her hand before Richard could object. As we headed, inside, I heard Richard make a phone call, his voice too low to make out the words. But I could guess who was on the other end. Avery, undoubtedly being instructed to prepare for our return and Samuel's early arrival. In Maddie's room, I helped her gather her things while keeping up a stream of cheerful chatter about her father's return. All the while, my mind was racing. I'd found Maddie, but our situation remained precarious. We still had to get back to the estate safely, and I had no idea what Richard and Avery might attempt before Samuel arrived. Miss Caroline, Maddie whispered as I zipped her backpack. Uncle Richard was saying strange things on the phone earlier. I kept my voice casual. What kind of strange things, sweetie? He said something about papers being signed tonight, and that I might need to go stay with Aunt Patricia for a while. Her little brow furrowed. I don't want to stay with Aunt Patricia. She smells like mothballs and doesn't let me have dessert. Papers being signed tonight. My blood ran cold. Whatever Richard was planning, it was happening today, before Samuel could return. Don't worry, I assured her. You're coming home with me, and we'll be there when your daddy arrives. No, Aunt Patricia, I promise. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this plan. Can we make welcome home cookies for Daddy? Absolutely. As we returned to the main room, Richard was ending his call. He smiled tightly when he saw us. All ready? I'll drive you back. Actually, I said, we'll take my car. I borrowed Lydia's Honda. His smile disappeared. Don't be ridiculous. Your car's at the estate. How would you get back there? Lydia lent me her car, I repeated firmly. Maddie and I will follow you back. I could see him calculating, trying to find a way to force us into his vehicle without making a scene. Finally, he shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. Suit yourself, though I can't imagine why you'd prefer that old Honda to the Range Rover. It has my car seat, Maddie piped up. Daddy says I always have to ride in my car seat. I smiled gratefully at her unexpected assistance. Exactly. Safety first. Richard's jaw tightened again, but he nodded curtly. Fine. Follow me closely. The route back can be confusing. As we walked to the cars, Maddie holding my hand tightly, I felt a small victory. We were leaving together, heading back to the estate where Lydia, our only ally, waited. Now I just needed to keep Maddie safe for a few more hours until Samuel returned. But as Richard's Range Rover pulled out of the driveway ahead of us, I couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous part of our ordeal was yet to come. The drive back to the Whitmore estate was tense, with Richard's Range Rover always visible in my rearview mirror. I deliberately positioned us in front, unwilling to give him the opportunity to lead us anywhere other than directly home. Maddie chattered happily from the back seat, clutching Mr. Ellie and speculating about what gifts her father might bring from New York. Daddy always brings me something special, she informed me. Last time it was a snow globe with tiny dancers inside. The time before that, it was a music box that plays my mommy's favorite song. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Your daddy loves you very much. She nodded solemnly. That's why Uncle Richard makes him mad sometimes. Uncle Richard says I should have a normal childhood with regular school and friends, but Daddy says he's keeping me safe. Safe from what, Maddie? She shrugged. Daddy just says vultures. Miss Avery says it's because he's paranoid. She leaned forward conspiratorially. I think it's because of what happened to Mommy. What do you mean? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Mommy got really sick really fast. Daddy said someone should have caught it sooner. That's why he only lets Dr. Brannon take care of me now. I filed this information away, another piece of the complex puzzle that was the Whitmore family. Samuel's protectiveness, his distrust of Richard, it was starting to make more sense. As we approached the estate gates, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. At the next stop sign, I quickly checked the screen. A text from Lydia. Be careful. Papers on dining table. Lawyers waiting. My heart sank. Whatever Richard had planned, it was already in motion. I needed to get Maddie somewhere safe until Samuel arrived. But where? The estate was Richard's territory, and now there were lawyers present, undoubtedly Richard's lawyers, ready to execute whatever scheme he'd concocted. I made a split-second decision as the gates opened before us. Instead of following the main driveway to the front of the house, I veered left toward the service entrance, earning an angry honk from Richard behind us. Miss Caroline? Maddie questioned. That's not the way to the house. I know, sweetie. We're going to play a game. I parked near the kitchen entrance, away from the view of the main house. It's called Secret Mission. We need to get to your playroom without anyone seeing us. Think we can do it? Her eyes widened with excitement. Like spies? Exactly like spies. Super. Quiet? Super sneaky. She nodded eagerly, immediately adopting an exaggerated tiptoe as we exited the car. I took her hand and led her through the service entrance, hearing Richard's car crunching up the main driveway behind us. The kitchen was empty, but I could hear voices from the formal dining room. Male voices I didn't recognize. Undoubtedly the lawyers Lydia had mentioned. We moved silently, through the back hallway and up the service stairs, avoiding the main staircase that would be visible from the foyer. Maddie's playroom was on the 3rd floor, a spacious area filled with toys, books, and a child-sized table and chairs. Most importantly, it had a heavy door with a lock. Mission accomplished, Maddie whispered as I closed the door behind us and turned the lock. Perfect spy work, I agreed, giving her a high five. Now, How about we build a fort while we wait for your daddy? She clapped her hands excitedly. With the big cushions from the window seat? Absolutely. As Maddie dragged cushions across the floor, I checked my phone again. It was just past 3:30 p.m. According to Samuel, he wouldn't arrive until 7, more than 3 hours to keep Maddie safe and away from whatever Richard was planning. A soft knock at the door made us both freeze. Miss Hayes? Lydia's voice came through the wood. It's just me. I opened the door cautiously, relaxing when I saw only Lydia in the hallway. She slipped inside, and I quickly relocked the door. They're looking for you, she said without preamble. Richard is furious that you didn't come in through the main entrance. What's happening downstairs? You mentioned lawyers? She nodded grimly. 3 of them, from Harrington and Webb, Richard's personal law firm, not the company's usual counsel. They've brought papers for Samuel to sign when he arrives. She lowered her voice, glancing at Maddie, who was happily arranging pillows. From what I overheard, it's a psychiatric evaluation order. They plan to claim Samuel is mentally unfit to run the company due to paranoid delusions since his wife's death. The pieces clicked into place. And once he's declared unfit, the proxy designation becomes void, and Richard takes control as the next blood relative. Exactly. Lydia's expression hardened. They've been planning this for months. The timing of the business trip, the specialist they brought in today, it was all orchestrated. What specialist? Dr. Mercer. He's still downstairs, a psychiatrist who specializes in corporate competency evaluations. Apparently, he's prepared to testify that based on Samuel's recent business decisions, including appointing you as proxy, he's suffering from delusional disorder. My mind raced. When exactly does Samuel arrive? Did he give you a specific time? His private jet. Lands at 6:15. The car will bring him straight here. Can you contact him? Warn him what's waiting? She shook her head. I tried. His phone goes straight to voicemail. He must still be in the air. I paced the small area of floor not covered by Maddie's growing fort. We need to stall them. Keep them from having those papers ready when Samuel walks in. They've thought of that, Lydia said, grimly. Richard has hired security. 2 men I've never seen before. They're stationed at the front door with instructions to bring Samuel directly to the dining room the moment he arrives. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Samuel would walk into an ambush, faced with lawyers, a psychiatrist, and fabricated evidence of mental instability. Even if he refused to sign immediately, the scene would be chaotic enough to keep him from reaching Maddie or me before Richard could implement whatever backup plan he surely had. Miss Caroline, Maddie called from inside her cushion fort. It's ready. Come see. I forced a smile. It looks amazing, sweetie. I'll be right there. Turning back to Lydia, I lowered my voice. Is there any way to get a message to Samuel before he reaches the house? Lydia thought for a moment. Marcus, his driver, has a separate phone. Samuel always calls him directly when the plane lands. Do you have Marcus's number? She nodded. I can text him, but Richard's watching me closely. I'll have to be careful. Tell him to bring Samuel to the greenhouse instead of the main entrance. We'll meet him there. Lydia hesitated. Richard's men will be watching for the car. Then we need a distraction. I glanced at the elaborate playroom around us, my eyes landing on the large entertainment system in the corner. The security system. Does it include fire alarms? Yes. Throughout the house. Why? A plan was forming in my mind. If the fire alarm goes off, everyone would evacuate to the front lawn, right? Security protocol? She nodded slowly, understanding, dawning in her eyes. Yes, it's automatic. The security team is trained to clear the house immediately. Perfect. Here's what we'll do. I outlined my plan quickly. At exactly 6:30, Lydia would trigger the fire alarm from the kitchen. The ensuing evacuation would pull everyone to the front of the house, creating confusion and drawing attention away from the back. Meanwhile, Maddie and I would use the commotion to slip out through the service entrance and make our way to the greenhouse to meet Samuel. It's risky, Lydia warned. If they realize you've taken Madeline, they won't have time to react properly. Once Samuel is with us, with the original proxy documents, Richard's plan falls apart. She nodded grimly. I'll text Marcus now, then head downstairs to maintain appearances. B. Ready at 6:30 exactly. After Lydia left, I joined Maddie in her fort, trying to appear calm while my mind raced through contingencies. What if the alarm failed? What if Richard somehow anticipated our plan? What if Samuel's flight was delayed? Miss Caroline? Maddie's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. Are you okay? You look worried. I forced a smile. Just thinking, sweetie. She scooted closer, her small face serious. Is it about Uncle Richard? I heard Lydia say he's being mean. Sometimes I forgot how perceptive she was. It's grown-up stuff, Maddie. Nothing for you to worry about. She frowned. That's what everyone always says, but I'm not a baby. I studied her thoughtful face, realizing that keeping her completely in the dark might do more harm than good. You're right, you're not a baby. The truth is, your Uncle Richard and your daddy have different ideas about how to run the family business, and sometimes that makes things complicated. She nodded sagely. Uncle Richard wants to be the boss instead of daddy. Something like that. But daddy is smarter, she declared with absolute confidence, and he has you now to help him. Her simple faith was both touching and terrifying. I checked my watch. 4:45 p.m. Less than 2 hours until our plan would be set in motion. How about we read a story while we wait for your daddy? I suggested, reaching for a nearby bookshelf. Can we read the princess one, where she outsmart the evil wizard? I smiled at the fitting choice. That sounds perfect. For the next hour, I read stories to Maddie, played a few rounds of Go Fish with a deck of cards I found in a drawer, and helped her rearrange her fort to make it more strategic, as she put it. All the while, I kept checking my watch, anxiety building as 6:30 approached. At 6:15, my phone vibrated with a text from Lydia. Plane landed, Marcus confirmed alternate plan, kitchen ready. It was time to prepare Maddie for our escape. I crouched down to her level, keeping my voice calm but serious. Maddie, remember our spy game from earlier? We're going to play another round, but this one's even more important. In a few minutes, a loud noise will start, the fire alarm. When that happens, we're going to sneak out of the house a special way to meet your daddy. Her eyes widened. Is there a real fire? No, sweetie. The alarm is just part of our mission. But we need to be super quiet and follow directions exactly. Can you do that? She nodded solemnly. Like real spies. Exactly like real spies. I gathered her backpack, tucking Mr. Ellie safely inside, and positioned us near the door. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. 6:25, 6:26, 6:27. My phone buzzed again. Richard and lawyers still in dining room. Security at front door. Clear path to service stairs. 6:28, 6:29. I took Maddie's hand, my heart pounding. Ready, Agent Maddie? She squeezed my hand, her expression determined. Ready, Agent Caroline? 6:30. For a moment, nothing happened. My stomach dropped. Had Lydia been caught? Had something gone wrong? Then the piercing wail of the fire alarm shattered the silence. Through the door, I could hear immediate commotion, doors opening, voices calling out, footsteps rushing down hallways. I waited 30 seconds, counting silently, then unlocked the playroom door and peered out. The hallway was empty, everyone apparently following protocol and heading downstairs. Now, I whispered to Maddie. Remember, quiet and fast. We slipped into the hallway and moved swiftly toward the service stairs, the alarm providing perfect cover for any noise we might make. Downstairs, I could hear voices in the main foyer, Richard's distinct tone rising above the others, issuing commands. We reached the service stairs without incident and descended quickly to the ground floor. Through a small window, I could see people gathering on the front lawn. Richard, Avery, the lawyers, and security personnel, all looking appropriately concerned about the apparent fire emergency. The service entrance was just ahead, unguarded and overlooked in the evacuation chaos. I pushed open the door, and we stepped outside into the fading afternoon light. This way, I whispered to Maddie, leading her along the side of the house toward the gardens. We kept close to the building, using shrubs and decorative stonework as a cover. The greenhouse loomed ahead, its glass panels reflecting the sunset in shades of orange and pink. Through the transparency, I could make out a tall figure pacing inside. Samuel Whitmore had arrived. We were halfway across the open garden when a shout rang out behind us. There they are! By the greenhouse! I turned to see Richard pointing in our direction, his face contorted with fury. Next. To him, one of the security guards was already moving, breaking into a run toward us. Run, Maddie, I urged, pulling her forward as we sprinted the remaining distance to the greenhouse. Samuel must have heard the commotion. The greenhouse door flung open as we approached. His face registered shock, then understanding as he took in the scene. His daughter and me running, security in pursuit. Inside, quickly, he commanded, ushering us through the door before stepping out to confront the approaching guard. I didn't hear what Samuel said to the man, but the guard stopped abruptly, uncertainty replacing his determination. A moment later, Samuel stepped back into the greenhouse, locking the door behind him. "Daddy!" Maddie flung herself into his arms. He lifted her easily, holding her tight while his eyes found mine over her shoulder. "It seems I've returned to quite a situation, Miss Hayes." I nodded, trying to catch my breath. "Richard has lawyers in the house. They're planning to have you declared mentally incompetent." His expression darkened. "I suspected as much. That's why I cut my trip short." He set Maddie down gently. "Did you read the documents in my safe?" "Yes. I understand now why they were so desperate to remove me from the picture." Outside, more figures were approaching the greenhouse. Richard, Avery, and what appeared to be the 3 lawyers, all looking thunderous. The fire alarm had stopped, the distraction serving its purpose and now concluded. Samuel straightened his shoulders, the posture of a man preparing for battle. "It seems my cousin is eager to have our confrontation sooner rather than later." He looked down at Maddie, his expression softening. "Sweetheart, Miss Caroline is going to show you the special hiding place in the greenhouse office, okay? I need to talk to Uncle Richard." Maddie nodded, though she clung to his hand. "Are you going to fire him like you did Mr. Peterson when he was mean to the mailroom people?" A small smile touched Samuel's lips. "Something like that." He turned to me, his expression serious again. "The proxy documents from the safe. Where are they?" "Still there, as far as I know. I returned them after reading them." He nodded. "Good. Take Maddie to the office and stay there until I come for you. Whatever you hear, don't open the door." I led Maddie to the small office at the back of the greenhouse, my heart pounding as I heard the main door open and angry voices fill the humid air. The last thing I saw before closing the office door was Samuel Whitmore standing tall among his exotic plants, ready to face the coup that had been brewing in his absence. The stage was set for the final confrontation, a battle not just for control of a company, but for a little girl's future and the legacy of a family. Through the thin office door, voices rose and fell like waves, sometimes clear enough to understand, sometimes just an angry murmur. Maddie sat on my lap in the single office chair. Mr. Ellie clutched to her chest as we listened to her father confront his cousin. "You've overplayed your hand, Richard." Samuel's voice was controlled but hard as steel. "Breaking into my office, falsifying medical records, separating my daughter from her caregiver against my explicit instructions. None of this paints the picture of a man concerned about my mental health." "Your behavior has become increasingly erratic," Richard responded, his tone dripping with false concern. "Appointing a complete stranger as proxy for Madeline's trust shares, isolating yourself and your daughter from family. These are not the actions of a stable CEO. They're the actions of a father protecting his child from opportunists." Avery's voice cut in, sharp and dismissive. "Samuel, please. This dramatic paranoia is exactly what concerns us. Dr. Mercer has reviewed your recent decisions and agrees there's cause for a formal evaluation. Dr. Mercer was paid handsomely for that opinion, I'm sure." There was a pause, then Richard again, his voice lower but still audible. "The board meeting is in 3 days. You have 2 choices: sign the voluntary evaluation order now, with dignity, or face a public challenge to your leadership. Either way, your little nanny experiment ends today." Samuel's laugh was cold. "You still don't understand what I've done, do you?" "Enlighten me." "The proxy designation you found in my office, the one that so concerned you, was incomplete. A draft. The final version, which was executed and filed with the company's independent counsel last month, is much more comprehensive." The silence that followed was electric. "What are you talking about?" Richard finally demanded. "Caroline Hayes isn't just Madeline's temporary proxy in the event of my death or incapacitation, real incapacitation, not your manufactured diagnosis. She becomes her legal guardian with full control of her trust until she turns 25. Avery's voice was incredulous. "That's impossible. The family court would never—" "The family court already approved it," Samuel cut in. "Judge Michaels signed the order 3 weeks ago. Caroline's background in childhood education, her exemplary character references, and my detailed reasoning regarding family conflicts of interest were quite persuasive." "You can't do this." Richard's voice had lost its smooth confidence. "You can't just hand over a billion-dollar trust to a schoolteacher." "I can, and I did. And unlike you, Caroline has no interest in using my daughter to control my company. Her only concern is Madeline's well-being." Maddie shifted in my lap, whispering, "Daddy sounds really mad." I stroked her hair reassuringly. Sometimes grown-ups have big disagreements, but your daddy is handling it. The voices outside grew more heated, with multiple people speaking at once. Then Samuel's voice cut through, loud and commanding. Enough! This discussion is over. Richard, you and your lawyers will leave my property immediately. Your access to Langston Capital is suspended pending a full investigation into your actions. You can't suspend me. I'm executive vice president and a family member. Being family doesn't grant you immunity from consequences. The security team will escort you out. Avery, you're terminated, effective immediately. Your severance package will be processed by HR. What followed was chaos, protests, threats of lawsuits, demands to speak to the board. Through it all, Samuel remained firm, his voice never rising again, but carrying absolute authority. Finally, the greenhouse door slammed, and silence fell. Maddie and I waited, unsure if it was safe to emerge. After several minutes, a gentle knock came at the office door. Caroline? Madeline? It's over. I opened the door to find Samuel standing alone, his tie loosened and his expression weary but resolute. Maddie immediately ran to him, and he lifted her into his arms. Did you win, Daddy? She asked, touching his face with concern. Yes, sweetheart. Uncle Richard won't be bothering us anymore. He looked over at me, his blue eyes holding a mixture of gratitude and something deeper I couldn't quite identify. Miss Hayes, Caroline, I owe you an explanation and an apology. You don't owe me anything, I said softly. You were protecting your daughter by placing an enormous responsibility on your shoulders without your knowledge or consent. He set Maddie down gently. Sweetheart, why don't you check on your butterfly garden? I need to speak with Miss Caroline for a moment. Maddie nodded and skipped off to a corner of the greenhouse where a small, netted enclosure housed her collection of caterpillars and chrysalises. Samuel gestured to the bench among the orchids. Please sit. As we sat, I noticed how exhausted he looked, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from carrying too many burdens for too long. I should have told you from the beginning, he said quietly, about the proxy designation, about Richard's ambitions, about all of it. But I couldn't risk anyone knowing what I was planning until it was legally secured. Why me? The question had been haunting me for days. Of all the people you could have chosen. Because you were exactly what I was looking for. His gaze was direct, unapologetic. Someone with a genuine love for children, impeccable references, no connections to my corporate world, and most importantly, someone with integrity. I had a private investigator research dozens of candidates before I found you. I blinked in surprise. You investigated me before hiring me? Thoroughly. Your former principal at Westlake Elementary described you as the most principled teacher I've ever had the privilege to work with. Your landlord said you once returned an accidental overpayment in your security deposit, despite being nearly broke yourself. Small things, perhaps, but revealing. I didn't know whether to be flattered or disturbed. So the nanny position was real, he assured me. I did need someone to care for Madeline during my trip, but it was also an opportunity to see if my research was correct, if you were truly the person I hoped you were. And if I wasn't? A small smile touched his lips. Then you would have been a nanny for 2 weeks, received excellent pay, and gone back to your life none the wiser. I processed this information slowly. The guardianship designation, is that real too? He nodded. Completely legal and binding. But, he added quickly, seeing my expression, it only activates if something happens to me. And even then, you have the right to decline. I've established a trust that would provide for Madeline's care and education regardless. You've thought of everything. When you're responsible for a child in a company that employs thousands, you have to. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Richard has been gunning for control of Langston Capital since my father died. When Elizabeth was diagnosed with cancer, he actually suggested I step down temporarily to focus on my family. A seemingly compassionate suggestion that would have given him the opening he needed. And after she passed, he became more aggressive, using my grief as evidence of instability. The board started listening. I needed to secure Madeline's future before they could act. I glanced over at Maddie, happily, examining her butterfly collection. What happens now? Richard will be removed from the company. The board won't have a choice once they see the evidence of his actions. Avery will likely face legal consequences for falsifying documents. And Madeline, his voice softened. Madeline needs stability, care, someone she can trust besides me. Our eyes met, and I understood what he was asking. Without words. You want me to stay on, not just as a nanny, but as a permanent part of her life. He nodded. Your contract was for 2 weeks. That ends tomorrow. But I'm offering you a permanent position, caring for Madeline, living here at the estate, with compensation that reflects the true nature of the responsibility. It was overwhelming, moving from unemployed teacher to guardian in waiting, for one of the wealthiest children in Tennessee in the span of a week. And yet, looking at Maddie, I couldn't imagine walking away from her now. I need time to think, I said honestly. Of course. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook, writing something before tearing out the page and handing it to me. This is what I'm proposing financially. Take all the time you need. I glanced at the figure and nearly choked. It was more money than I would make in 5 years of teaching. This is generous. It's fair, he corrected. You would be sacrificing your career, your independence, potentially even future relationships to become part of Madeline's life in such a significant way. I don't take that lightly. Before I could respond, Maddie came running back, excitement on her face. Daddy! Miss Caroline! One of my chrysalises is cracking. The butterfly is coming out. We followed her to the netted enclosure, watching as a delicate monarch butterfly emerged, its wings still wet and folded. It has to wait for its wings to dry before it can fly, Maddie explained authoritatively. Otherwise, they'd crumple up and it would never get to be free. Samuel's eyes met, mine over his daughter's head. Freedom is important, he said softly. So is knowing when you've found the right place to land. As we watched the butterfly slowly unfurl its wings, I felt something shift inside me, a recognition that sometimes life's most meaningful paths are the ones we never saw coming. The crisis had passed. Richard and his allies had been expelled from the house, and security now answered only to Samuel. But as evening fell and the adrenaline of the day began to fade, I found myself standing at a crossroads I never expected, between the life I had planned and the life that was suddenly being offered. Samuel Whitmore had entrusted me with his most precious treasure. Now I had to decide if I was truly ready to accept that trust, not just for 2 weeks, but potentially for a lifetime. That night, as I tucked Maddie into bed in her own room, no longer afraid of Richard's interference, she asked me a question that pierced straight to the heart of my dilemma. Miss Caroline, are you going to be my new mommy? The innocent question caught me off guard. No, sweetie. I'm your nanny and hopefully your friend. No one can replace your mommy. She considered this solemnly. But you take care of me like a mommy, and Daddy smiles more when you're here. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. Sometimes people come into our lives and become very important without replacing the people we've lost. Your mommy will always be your mommy, but maybe I can be someone special in your life too, in a different way. She nodded, satisfied with this answer. I hope you stay. Forever, she whispered as she drifted toward sleep. Mr. Ellie hopes so too. As I turned out her light and quietly closed her door, I found Samuel waiting in the hallway, a respectful distance away. She's asleep? He asked softly. I nodded. She had quite a day. We all did. Indeed. He hesitated, then asked, Would you join me for a cup of tea? There are still some things we should discuss. I followed him downstairs to the kitchen, not the formal dining room where the confrontation had occurred, but the warm, functional heart of the house. It felt like a deliberate choice, a step away from power plays and toward something more genuine. As Samuel prepared the tea himself, declining Lydia's offer of assistance, I watched him with new eyes. This powerful man who commanded a corporate empire was also a father who knew how his daughter liked her cocoa and which stuffed animal she couldn't sleep without. There was a complexity to him I was only beginning to understand. I want you to know, he said as he placed a steaming mug before me, that whatever you decide about staying, you will always have my gratitude and support. If you prefer to return to teaching, I will ensure you have a position at the school of your choice. The offer was generous, but it also underscored the imbalance of power between us. He could open doors I couldn't even approach on my own. Why do I feel like this isn't just about Maddie? I asked quietly. His eyes met mine, startled by my directness. For a moment, I thought he might deflect the question. Instead, he set down his mug and answered, with unexpected honesty. Because it isn't. Not entirely. He took a deep breath. When I lost Elizabeth, I lost more than my wife. I lost my partner, my confidant, the one person who saw me as Samuel, not as a Whitmore or a CEO. Since then, I've been functioning, not living, focused on protecting what remains rather than building anything new. And now I've watched you stand up to Richard and Avery, risk your safety for my daughter, and handle a situation most people would have fled from with remarkable grace. It's awakened something I thought was gone. The implication hung in the air between us, neither of us quite ready to name it. Samuel, I said, using his first name for the first time. I care deeply for Maddie, and I admire what you've built and how fiercely you protect her. But I need to make this decision for the right reasons, not out of gratitude or other complicated feelings that might not survive in the light of normal day-to-day life. He nodded, accepting this boundary with respect. Of course, take all the time you need. The position remains open, regardless of anything else that might develop between us. As I returned to my room that night, my mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. The events of the past week had transformed me from an unemployed teacher to someone entrusted with the future of a child, and potentially a significant role in a world I barely understood. Tomorrow would bring decisions that would shape not just my life, but Maddie's as well. For now, though, the immediate danger had passed. Richard's plan had been thwarted, Samuel had returned, and the truth had finally emerged from behind the veil of secrets and manipulations. Whatever I decided, I knew one thing with certainty: nothing would ever be the same again. Morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. I'd spent most of the night weighing my options, examining my heart, and trying to separate immediate emotions from long-term reality. By dawn, I'd made my decision, though I wasn't quite ready to share it. I dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, then headed downstairs, finding the house unusually quiet. The aftermath of yesterday's confrontation had left a strange vacuum. No Richard barking orders, no Avery watching from corners, just the normal staff going about their duties with noticeably lighter expressions. In the kitchen, I found Maddie already at the island, happily demolishing a stack of pancakes while Chef Anton beamed at her appetite. "Miss Caroline," she exclaimed, syrup dripping from her fork. "Daddy said we can go to the botanical gardens today. They have a butterfly pavilion." I smiled, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "That sounds wonderful. Is your father around?" "In his office," Chef Anton supplied. "He's been on calls since dawn. Something about board members and emergency meetings. Of course, the fallout from Richard's attempted coup would require immediate damage control. The corporate world wouldn't wait for personal decisions or emotional processing. After helping Maddie finish her breakfast and change into butterfly-appropriate attire, I decided to check on Samuel before we left. His office. Doctor was ajar, and I could hear his measured voice addressing someone on speakerphone. "The documentation is extensive, Margaret. Bank transfers, falsified medical reports, even recorded conversations planning to have Caroline institutionalized. The board won't have a choice once legal reviews the evidence." I knocked gently, not wanting to eavesdrop further. Samuel looked up, immediately ending his call when he saw me. "Caroline," he said, standing. "Good morning. I hope you slept well after everything." "As well as could be expected," I replied honestly. "Maddie tells me we're headed to the botanical gardens?" His face brightened. "Yes, I promised her weeks ago. With everything that's happened, I thought we could use a normal family. I mean, a normal day out." He caught himself, looking slightly embarrassed at the slip. "Normal sounds perfect," I said, saving him from the awkward moment. "But are you sure you can get away? It sounds like you have a lot happening with the company." He shrugged, closing his laptop decisively. "The company has survived for 3 generations. It can manage without me for one day while I take my daughter to see butterflies." He paused, searching my face. "That is, if you'd like to join us? I understand if you need space to think." "I'd love to come," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. "Though I should warn you, I've made my decision about the position. I'd like to discuss it with you, but perhaps after our outing." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, anxiety. I couldn't quite tell. "Of course. Tonight, then." The botanical gardens proved to be exactly what we all needed. Neutral territory away from the mansion's loaded atmosphere, filled with beauty and life. Maddie flitted from exhibit to exhibit with boundless energy, her face lighting up when we entered the butterfly pavilion, and a delicate blue morpho landed on her outstretched finger. "It trusts me, Daddy," she whispered in awe. Samuel crouched beside her, his normally serious face softened with wonder. "It knows you're special, just like I do." Watching them together, this powerful man completely absorbed in his daughter's joy, I felt something shift inside me. Here, away from the trappings of wealth and power, I could see the truth of what I'd be committing to. Not just a job or a position, but a family that had been fractured by loss and was struggling to heal. Later, as Maddie explored the children's garden, Samuel and I sat on a bench nearby, close enough to watch her, but with a moment of privacy. "She's happier than I've seen her in months," he observed quietly. "You've been good for her, Caroline." "She's an amazing child," I replied. "So perceptive, so resilient. She reminds me why I became a teacher in the first place. To nurture. That kind of spirit." He nodded, his eyes still on his daughter. "That's what Elizabeth used to say, that teaching was about nurturing spirits, not just filling minds." He turned to me then. "You would have liked her, I think. She had a way of cutting through pretense, seeing the truth of people." It was the first time he'd spoken about his late wife directly to me, and I recognized it for the significant gesture it was. She must have been remarkable. She was. His voice held sadness, but not the raw grief I might have expected. And she would be the first to tell me that Maddie needs stability and love more than she needs the Whitmore name or fortune. The conversation paused as Maddie ran over to show us a leaf shaped exactly like a heart, then raced off again to continue her explorations. "When Elizabeth was diagnosed," Samuel continued once Maddie was out of earshot, "it was already stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lived for 8, through sheer determination to see Maddie's 4th birthday." His voice remained steady, but I could see the cost of that control in the tension around his eyes. "Before she died, she made me promise 2 things. That I would make sure Maddie knew she was loved more than anything in the world, and that I wouldn't let my grief or the company consume me to the point where I forgot how to live." I listened, understanding that he was sharing something precious, something he probably hadn't spoken of to many others. "The first promise was easy to keep," he continued. "The second," he sighed, "I've failed at that." 1. Until recently. Our eyes met, and in that moment, something honest and unguarded passed between us. Not romance exactly, but the recognition of 2 people who had unexpectedly found something valuable in each other. "Samuel," I began cautiously, "whatever I decide about the position, you should know that I've come to care deeply for Maddie, and I admire the father you are to her." "But," he prompted gently, hearing the unspoken reservation, "but I need to be sure that I'm making this decision for the right reasons, that I'm considering what's truly best for Maddie long term, not just responding to an extraordinary week of drama and connection." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's exactly why you're the right person for this. You put her needs above everything, above money, above your own feelings, even above mine." The afternoon passed in a pleasant blur of botanical exhibits, ice cream, and Maddie's endless questions about every plant and creature we encountered. By the time we returned to the estate, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured grounds that no longer felt quite so intimidating. After dinner and Maddie's bedtime routine, Samuel invited me to join him in the library, a warm, book-lined room that felt more lived in than the formal spaces of the house. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild evening, creating an atmosphere of comfortable intimacy. "So," he said as we settled into leather chairs, "you've made your decision." I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. "I have, but first I'd like to propose some conditions, things that would be important to me if I were to accept the position." His eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "I'm listening." "First, I want to continue teaching in some capacity. Not necessarily full-time, but enough to maintain my skills and connection to my profession. Perhaps tutoring underprivileged children or developing educational programs through the Langston Foundation." "Easily arranged," he agreed. "Second, I want a clear delineation between my role as Maddie's caregiver and any personal relationship that might develop between us." I met his gaze directly. "I won't be an employee you're dating. That power dynamic would be unhealthy for everyone, especially Maddie." His expression was serious, thoughtful. "What would you suggest instead, if I accept this position? I would want my compensation and role to be legally structured through a trust, independent of your personal control. My authority with Maddie would need to be respected and supported, even if our personal relationship were to change in the future, for better or worse." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "That's both wise and fair. I can have the legal team draft something that establishes your independence while securing your position." "And finally," I said, my voice softening. I would want honesty between us. Always. No more secrets, no more unilateral decisions that affect us both. I understand the need for confidentiality in business matters, but in anything that concerns Maddie or our household, we would need to be partners, not employer and employee. A slow smile spread across his face. These conditions suggest you're leaning toward accepting the position. I returned his smile. They do, don't they? The tension that had been building between us released in a shared moment of quiet understanding. Samuel leaned forward, his expression earnest. Caroline, when I created that proxy designation, I was thinking strategically, finding the right person to protect Maddie from Richard's ambitions. What I never expected was to find someone who would not only fulfill that legal role, but would bring light back into our home. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm not asking for anything beyond what you're ready to give. I just want you to know that there's room here for whatever relationship develops naturally between us, at whatever pace feels right. His honesty deserved my own. I care for both of you, more than I thought possible after such a short time, but I'm also aware that we've only known each other under extraordinary circumstances. Real life isn't all corporate intrigue and dramatic confrontations. He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. Thank goodness for that. I've had enough drama to last a lifetime. So we take it slowly, I suggested. I accept the position as Maddie's primary caregiver, with the conditions we've discussed. We establish a healthy routine for her, create stability, and I gestured between us. We get to know each other in normal circumstances. No pressure, no expectations. I'd like that very much, he said softly. The fire crackled in a moment of comfortable silence. Outside the library windows, the estate grounds stretched into darkness, but they no longer felt like alien territory. Somehow, in the span of a tumultuous week, this place had begun to feel like it could be home. There's something else you should know, Samuel said after a moment. Something I've been considering since before all this happened with Richard. Oh? I've been thinking about stepping back from day-to-day operations at Langston Capital. Not immediately, but gradually over the next year or two. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign he was sharing something important. Elizabeth was right. I've let the company consume too much of my life. Maddie deserves a father who's present, not just physically but emotionally. That's a big change, I observed. Are you sure it's what you want? I've built my identity around being CEO for so long that the idea terrified me at first. But watching you with Maddie, seeing how fully present you are with her, it made me realize what I've been missing. His gaze was steady, vulnerable. I don't want to miss anymore. In that moment, I could see the future taking shape. Before us, not perfect or guaranteed, but full of possibility. A life where Maddie would grow up surrounded by love and stability, where Samuel could find balance between his responsibilities to his company and his family, where I could continue my passion for education while helping to create the home this father and daughter deserved. So, Samuel said, a hint of nervousness in his voice, is, that a yes? Will you stay? I reached across the space between our chairs and took his hand, feeling the strength and warmth of his fingers as they curled around mine. Yes, I said simply. I'll stay. His smile was worth every moment of uncertainty, every risk I'd taken. In his eyes, I saw not just gratitude or attraction, but a deep recognition, the look of someone who has found what they didn't even know they were searching for. Outside the library window, the moon rose over Nashville, casting silver light across the estate that would now be my home. Not as an employee or a guest, but as an essential part of the foundation this little family was rebuilding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would surely be many, we would face them together. Not as characters in some dramatic saga, but as real people finding their way through love, loss, and the everyday miracle of beginning again. 6 months later, the autumn leaves crunched beneath my feet as I walked along the garden path, a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands against the October chill. 6 months had passed since the day I'd agreed to stay at the Whitmore estate. 6 months of adjustments, challenges, joys, and unexpected developments that had transformed all our lives. Maddie spotted me from the tire swing Samuel had installed on the massive oak tree and waved enthusiastically. "Miss Caroline, watch how high I can go." I smiled, watching her pump her legs with determined focus. We'd settled into a comfortable rhythm, she and I, no longer nanny in charge, but something deeper. I wasn't her mother and never tried to be, but I'd become a constant, loving presence in her life, someone she could trust absolutely. Impressive height, I called back, settling on a nearby bench. Just be careful not to go over the top. That's what Daddy always says, she replied with an exaggerated eye roll that made me laugh. At 6 now, she was developing the first hints of preteen attitude, though her heart remained as open and loving as ever. Speaking of Samuel, I spotted him emerging from the greenhouse, a small potted orchid in his hands. The past months had softened him in subtle ways. He smiled more easily, laughed more frequently, and the perpetual furrow between his brows had all but disappeared. He still worked hard, still carried the weight of Langston Capital on his shoulders, but he'd kept his promise to create more balance in his life. "Good morning," he said, joining me on the bench and setting the orchid between us. "For your office. It's the same variety as the one that was blooming the day everything changed." I touched the delicate purple petals, moved by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It's beautiful. Thank you." Our relationship had evolved with careful deliberation, each step forward taken with Maddie's well-being in mind. We'd had our first official date 3 months ago, dinner at a small restaurant in downtown Nashville, where no one recognized the reclusive CEO of Langston Capital. Our second date had been a concert at the Ryman Auditorium. Our third, a simple walk along the Cumberland River at sunset. Each encounter had deepened our connection, confirming that what had sparked between us during that tumultuous week wasn't just adrenaline or proximity, but something genuine and lasting. "The board approved the final restructuring plan yesterday," Samuel said, watching Maddie swing. "Effective January 1st, I'll be transitioning to executive chairman, with daily operations handled by the new CEO. How does it feel?" I asked, knowing how momentous this change was for him. He considered the question carefully. Liberating, terrifying, right. He turned to me, his blue eyes clear and certain. "I've spent 20 years building something I'm proud of. Now I get to focus on building something even more important." His hand found mine on the bench between us, our fingers intertwining with easy familiarity. "The Foundation's educational initiative launches next week," I reminded him, excitement bubbling in my voice. 25 scholarships for the first year, with the teacher mentorship program starting in January. The Whitmore Foundation's new educational initiative had become my passion project, a comprehensive program providing scholarships, resources, and mentorship to underprivileged students throughout Tennessee. Samuel had given me complete autonomy over its development, along with a budget that still made me dizzy to contemplate. "The press conference is scheduled for Tuesday," he confirmed, "though I still think you should be the one speaking, not me. It's your vision." I shook my head. "We're partners in this. Besides, you're much better with the media than I am." The word partners had become our touchstone. In parenting, Maddie in managing the household, in developing the Foundation's work, and increasingly in our personal relationship. The legal framework we'd established ensured my independence while acknowledging our interconnected roles. I wasn't an employee. I was an equal contributor to our shared life. "Have you heard anything from Richard?" I asked, the question arising naturally as we discussed the company transition. Samuel's expression tightened slightly, the only reminder of the tension that had once dominated this household. "His lawsuit against the company was dismissed last month. He's moved to Florida, apparently. Started some kind of investment firm." After being removed from Langston Capital, Richard had launched a bitter legal battle, claiming wrongful termination and character defamation. The case had collapsed when evidence of his plotting came to light, including Avery's sworn testimony about their plan to have me institutionalized. "And Avery? Community service and probation for the document falsification. She's working for a small firm in Atlanta now." He shrugged. "People like that always land on their feet." "Daddy! Miss Caroline! Look what I found!" Maddie came, running toward us, something cupped carefully in her hands. She opened them to reveal a perfect monarch butterfly, its wings slowly opening and closing. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Samuel said, leaning forward to examine her find. "But remember what we talked about with wild creatures?" She nodded solemnly. "They need to be free. I was just going to show you before I let it go." I smiled at her. Thoughtfulness. "That's perfect. Maybe we can make a wish for it before it flies away." Her face lit up at the suggestion. "Yes, I'll wish for it to find its butterfly family." As we gathered around Maddie's outstretched hands, watching the monarch prepare for flight, I was struck by how far we'd all come. The frightened, suspicious man I'd met 6 months ago had blossomed into a loving, present father. The solemn, cautious child had found her voice and confidence. And I, the unemployed teacher desperate for any job, had discovered a purpose and place that fulfilled me in ways I never imagined possible. 1, 2, 3, Maddie counted, then gently raised her hands. The butterfly hesitated for just a moment before lifting into the air, its orange wings catching the morning sunlight as it spiraled upward and away. "It's going home," Maddie declared with satisfaction. Samuel's arm slipped around my waist, drawing me closer as we watched the butterfly disappear into the blue October sky. "Speaking of home," he said quietly, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." My heart quickened at his tone. "Oh? I know we agreed to take things slowly, and I respect that completely. But these past months have shown me something I think we both already knew." His voice was steady, but I could feel the slight tremor in his hand against my back. "We're building something special here. The three of us. A family." Maddie had wandered a few steps away, chasing a leaf carried by the breeze, but still within earshot. "Caroline," Samuel continued, turning to face me fully, "I'm not asking for any change in our arrangement. I'm not asking you to be anything other than exactly who you are, but I am asking if you would consider making this arrangement permanent, if you would consider marrying me." Though we'd been moving steadily in this direction, the actual question still took my breath away. I looked from Samuel to Maddie, who had stopped chasing leaves and was watching us, with wide, hopeful eyes. "Did you know about this?" I asked her, suspecting a conspiracy. She giggled, bouncing on her toes. "Daddy practiced with me all week. I told him you would say yes because you love us and we love you, and that's what matters most." Out of the mouths of babes. I turned back to Samuel, seeing vulnerability and hope in his expression. This powerful man who commanded a corporate empire was standing before me with his heart completely exposed, waiting for my answer. "I would be honored to marry you," I said softly. "Not because of this place, or your name, or anything else, but because of who you are, who we are together." His smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. Before he could respond, Maddie launched herself at us both, wrapping her arms around our legs in a fierce hug. "Now we're really a family," she exclaimed. "Can I be the flower girl? Can I help plan everything? Can we have butterflies at the wedding?" We laughed, both kneeling to embrace her properly, forming a circle of three that felt complete and right. "Yes to everything," Samuel promised her, his eyes never leaving mine. "But the most important part is already here. Later that evening, after Maddie was asleep and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Samuel and I sat in the library, the room that had become our special place for important conversations. The engagement ring on my finger caught the firelight, sending small rainbows dancing across the book-lined walls. "I never thought I'd find this again," Samuel said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on the back of my hand. After Elizabeth died, I closed that part of myself off completely, focused on Maddie, on the company, on anything but the emptiness. "I know," I said gently, "and I never expected to find a family this way. Life has strange and wonderful surprises sometimes." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "When I hired that investigator to find the perfect guardian for Maddie, I gave him a list of qualities to look for: integrity, compassion, intelligence, strength of character. I never included someone I could fall in love with on that list. That would have been a rather unusual job requirement," I teased. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Indeed, but here we are anyway." "Here we are," I agreed, leaning into his embrace. Outside the window, the estate grounds stretched into darkness, but they no longer seemed imposing or alien. This place that had once intimidated me had become home in every sense of the word, not because of its grandeur or luxury, but because of the love that now filled its rooms. Love that had transformed cold marble and glass into a true sanctuary. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: foundation work, wedding planning, the continuing transition at Langston Capital. But tonight, in this moment of quiet connection, the future stretched before us with infinite possibility. I thought back to that first day, arriving at the imposing mansion with nothing but 2 suitcases and desperate hope. I could never have imagined where that threshold crossing would lead. To a frightened little girl who would capture my heart, to a complex man who would become my partner in every sense, to a purpose that would fulfill my deepest professional aspirations. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes it leads us down darker roads, through struggle and uncertainty. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to keep walking, those unexpected turns lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Samuel's arms tightened around me as if he could read my thoughts. "No regrets?" he asked softly. I turned to face him, cupping his cheek in my palm. Not a single one. As our lips met in a tender kiss, I knew with absolute certainty that this was where I belonged, not as the nanny, not as the proxy, but as the heart of a family reborn from loss into something beautiful and lasting. Sometimes the most powerful truths come in whispers, like a child's warning that changes everything. And sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with a simple decision to stay, to face the unknown, to trust your heart, and to believe that even after the darkest storms, light will find its way back in.